I came home early on a Tuesday afternoon, hours before I was supposed to. A canceled flight, a rebooked seat, a quiet decision to surprise my husband instead of texting ahead. I remember thinking it might be nice, to catch him off guard, to feel normal again for a moment. The house was silent when I opened the door. His car sat in the driveway. That detail registered before anything else. I assumed he was upstairs, maybe napping, maybe on a call. I started up the stairs, already rehearsing the smile, the joke about bad airlines and worse coffee. Then I heard his laugh. It stopped me mid-step, not just because it was loud, but because it was light, carefree. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. Something in my chest tightened before my mind could catch up. I stood there on the landing, half hidden by the banister, listening. "Trust me," he said into the phone, amused, confident. 32 was the best decision I've made in years. Energy for days. Not like being married to someone who needs sleep after 10 minutes. My breath left my body in one sharp, silent exhale. Ice slid through my veins as his voice carried on, casual and cruel. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't hiding. He was comfortable, bragging, mocking, laughing with someone about me like I was an old joke. "She has no idea," he added. "Too busy with her investments and work trips. Honestly, I've been happier these past 4 months than I have in a decade." 4 months. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself as he kept talking. About her apartment, about seeing her Thursday at 6, about how easy it was to lie and say he was at book club. More laughter, more confidence, not a shred of guilt. I didn't confront him, I didn't cry, I didn't storm upstairs. I turned around quietly, walked back down the stairs, picked up my suitcase, and left my own house. I checked into a hotel and sat on the edge of the bed for 3 hours, staring at nothing, replaying every word. 23 years of marriage, 2 adult children, a life we built brick by brick, retirement plans we'd discussed over dinner just weeks earlier, and my husband was sleeping with a woman 20 years younger, while mocking me to his friends. That was the moment everything ended. Not with a fight, but with clarity. When people hear 23 years of marriage, they imagine something solid, predictable, safe. They imagine routines and shared jokes and an unspoken language built over decades. In many ways, that was us, at least on the surface. I met my husband in my late 20s when my life was busy and ambitious and pointed forward. He was charming in a quiet way, not flashy, not loud. He listened. He asked thoughtful questions. He made me feel seen in rooms where I'd always felt like background noise. We talked for hours the first night we met, about work, about money, about the kind of future we wanted. Stability mattered to both of us, partnership, building something that would last. We married young enough to still believe love was mostly about effort. The early years were a blur of long workdays and late dinners. I was building my career from the ground up, pouring myself into something that felt risky but promising. He worked too, at first, part-time design jobs, freelance projects. When the kids came, the conversations shifted. Who would stay home more? Who would step back? We agreed, together, that he would, at least for a while. A while became years. I didn't resent it. Not then. I was proud of what I was building, and I was grateful that our children had a parent who was always present. I paid the bills. I handled the investments. I planned for the future. He handled the home, the schedules, the emotional labor of raising kids. It felt balanced. It felt fair. When the kids grew older, I assumed he'd go back to work full-time. He didn't. He volunteered. He took yoga classes. He met friends for lunch. I told myself that after years of supporting me and raising our family, he'd earned an easier life. I never questioned where he went during the day. I never checked his phone. I trusted him because trust was the foundation I thought we stood on. By the time the house grew quiet, kids off living their own lives, I thought we'd earned a second chapter. Travel, slower mornings, long dinners, where we talked about everything except logistics. But somewhere along the way, the conversations changed. He laughed less with me, touched me less. When I reached for him in bed, he was tired, distracted. When I asked if something was wrong, he said nothing was wrong. Just stress, just age, just life. I believed him. I wanted to. We still planned retirement accounts, investment properties, long-term goals. Just last month, we'd talked about downsizing someday, maybe moving closer to the city. He nodded, smiled, agreed. I mistook his silence for contentment. What I didn't see, what I couldn't see, was that while I was planning our future, he was already living a different present. The distance I felt didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, disguised as routine. I told myself marriages evolve, passion fades, that love looks different after decades. I told myself that being needed mattered more than being wanted. I was wrong. Because while I was honoring the life we built, he was dismantling it piece by piece, finding excitement elsewhere, youth elsewhere, validation elsewhere. And he didn't just betray me. He mocked me for trusting him enough not to look. When I think back now, the signs were there. The extra care with his phone, the sudden interest in his appearance, the book club nights that never came with a book. I ignored them all, not because I was blind, but because I believed in us. That belief was the last thing I lost. The first warning signs didn't arrive with alarms or confrontation. They slipped in quietly, disguised as small shifts, easy to explain away if you wanted to keep believing. It started with his phone, not the obvious kind of secrecy. He didn't guard it like a vault or snap at me for looking. It was subtler than that. He began taking calls in other rooms, stepping outside to get better reception, turning the screen face down on the table, a habit he'd never had before. When I asked who had called, he answered casually, a friend, someone from book club, a group text. Book club. He mentioned it offhandedly one evening, as if it had always been part of his routine. A group that met once a week. Thursday nights. Discussion, wine, relaxation. I remember smiling and saying it sounded nice, that he deserved something just for himself. He never once brought a book home. At first, I told myself that maybe they talked more than they read. Maybe I was being unfair, suspicious without reason. I had a career built on logic and planning, not paranoia. I refused to become someone who monitored her partner's movements. Then came the clothes, new ones, better fitted, bought without mention. He started caring about how he looked on days he claimed were casual, smoothing his hair before leaving, checking his reflection twice. A new cologne appeared in the bathroom cabinet. When I asked about it, he shrugged, said he'd picked it up on sale. I noticed he only wore it on Thursdays. Our intimacy thinned quietly, like fog lifting, until you didn't realize how much warmth was gone until it was cold. He was tired. He wasn't in the mood. He needed space. When I reached for him, his body didn't lean back anymore. It stayed still. I asked if he was happy. He said yes. I asked if we were okay. He said we were fine. The answers were quick, practiced, not defensive, almost bored, as if the questions themselves were unnecessary. That should have scared me more than anger would have. The stories began to slip, not in dramatic ways, just enough to leave seams. One Thursday, he said book club ended late because the discussion ran long. The next week, he said they barely talked about the book at all. One night, he mentioned a member named Claire. Another night, it was just the group. Details changed depending on the day. Once I asked what they were reading. He paused, blinking, just long enough to register. Then he smiled and said, "Some thriller. You wouldn't like it." There were dozens of thrillers. He named none. I laughed it off, told myself I was reading too much into it. After all, we'd been married more than 2 decades. People didn't just throw that away. Not without reason. Not without signs that screamed instead of whispered. But my body knew before my mind allowed it. The way my chest tightened when he left the house on Thursdays. The way I checked the clock without meaning to. The way silence settled heavier in the evenings he was gone. Something in me had started keeping score even while I insisted there was nothing to count. I found myself replaying moments. His distracted smile. His impatience when I asked about his day. The way he talked about youth and energy as if they were currencies he'd been denied. I wondered when I had become something he measured himself against. Still, I said nothing, because confronting him would mean admitting the possibility that my marriage wasn't just tired, but broken, and I wasn't ready to face that. So I stayed quiet. And in that quiet, the truth gathered momentum, waiting for the moment it could no longer be contained. The truth didn't arrive in fragments. It detonated. I came home early that Tuesday because plans changed. Nothing symbolic, nothing dramatic. A canceled flight, a rebooked seat. I hadn't even told him yet. I thought surprising him might feel nice, like reclaiming something ordinary. The house was quiet when I walked in, too quiet. His car was in the driveway, which surprised me. He shouldn't have been home. I called his name once, no answer. I started upstairs, suitcase still in my hand, already forming a smile that never made it to my face. Halfway up, I heard his voice. Not calling for me, laughing. It stopped me cold, not just because he was on the phone, but because of how he sounded. Loose, confident, alive in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. Something in my body told me not to move. I stood there on the landing, listening as his words spilled out, unfiltered. Girl, I'm telling you, he said, amused. 32 was the best decision I've made in years. My stomach dropped. He's got energy for days, he continued, voice light, almost proud. Not like being married to someone who needs a nap after 10 minutes. I pressed my hand against the wall as if the house itself had tilted. His laughter came again, easy, indulgent. Whoever was on the other end said something that made him laugh harder. Oh, please. She doesn't suspect a thing, he said. Too busy with her precious investments and work trips. My ears rang. I've honestly been happier these past 4 months than I've been in a decade, he added casually. You should see his place, though. Total bachelor apartment. But who cares when he looks like that shirtless and does what he does with those hands? He lowered his voice after that, but not enough. Thursday at 6. He is cooking dinner. Well, dinner. You know what I mean. More giggling. Book club, he said. As if anyone actually reads at those things. It's just an excuse to drink wine. 4 months. Not a mistake. Not a moment. A season. Planned. Scheduled. Repeated. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I turned around slowly, every movement deliberate, walked back down the stairs without making a sound, grabbed my suitcase from where I'd dropped it, left my own house like a stranger slipping out before being seen. I drove to a hotel and sat on the edge of the bed for hours, fully dressed, suitcase unopened, mind replaying every sentence on a loop. 23 years of marriage, 2 adult children, a life built carefully, deliberately. And he was sleeping with a man 20 years younger, while mocking me to his friends. That night I didn't rage. I planned. I called an attorney friend and asked for the best divorce lawyer in the state. I scheduled an emergency meeting with my financial advisor. I updated my will. I opened a new bank account and redirected my income. I changed passwords, secured documents. At 7 that evening, I texted my husband. Flight delayed, stuck at the airport, probably staying overnight. See you tomorrow. His reply came seconds later. Okay, honey. Safe travels. Love you. I stared at the screen. Then I put the phone down. The marriage didn't end when he cheated. It ended when I realized I didn't need to beg, scream, or prove anything. I just needed evidence, and I knew exactly where he'd be on Thursday at 6. The night after I left the house, sleep never came. I lay on the hotel bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, my mind moving with a strange, detached precision. Shock had passed. Denial never arrived. What settled in its place was something colder, an almost clinical clarity. I replayed his words again and again, not to torture myself, but to understand them. The confidence, the ease, the way he spoke about me like I was an inconvenience he'd outgrown. It wasn't just the affair that cut, it was the contempt. Betrayal hurts, but humiliation burns. By morning, I wasn't crying. I was organizing. I met with the attorney on Wednesday at 9. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She asked questions, direct ones, length of the marriage, assets, timeline. When I told her what I'd overheard, she nodded once and said, Audio alone won't be enough in this state. We need proof. I didn't hesitate. I know where he'll be, Thursday at 6. She smiled, not warmly, efficiently. Then we hire a PI today. By Wednesday afternoon, everything was in motion. The investigator was retained. My financial advisor had already begun restructuring what could be legally protected before filing. I updated my will, removed my husband entirely. Everything would go to our children. I opened a new bank account and redirected my income, changed passwords, locked down access. I wasn't being vengeful. I was being careful. When I texted him that night about the delayed flight, the overnight stay, his response was immediate and affectionate. Love you. The lie sat on my phone like a fingerprint I couldn't wipe away. Thursday arrived quietly. I told him I had a client dinner. He barely looked up when I said it. That's fine, he replied easily. I have book club anyway. The smile he tried to hide told me everything. At 6:07 p.m., the PI texted me. He's arrived. Empty-handed. No book. At 11:43 p.m., another message. Left. Different clothes. Photos attached. I didn't open the pictures right away. I waited until Friday morning, coffee cooling on the table, sunlight cutting through the kitchen window like nothing in my life had changed. 53 photos, time-stamped, clear. His hand on the man's chest, a kiss at the door, familiar intimacy captured in high resolution. I forwarded everything to my attorney. "We're good to file," she said. "Papers will be ready Monday. Where do you want him served?" I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, "At his apartment, next time he goes." She laughed, short and sharp. "Oh, we can absolutely arrange that." When the server handed him the papers days later, I watched the video twice, his face shifting from confusion to panic in seconds, the way his hands shook, the way he screamed, demanded answers, tried to make sense of a reality he hadn't prepared for. I poured myself a drink that night, not in celebration, in acknowledgement. The reaction I expected, begging, remorse, collapse, came later. Calls I didn't answer. Messages I blocked. Knocks on a door I no longer opened. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly he unraveled. It was how calm I felt watching it happen. Because in the space between overhearing that phone call and filing for divorce, something fundamental had changed. I wasn't reacting to him anymore. I was responding to myself. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It came in waves, each one louder, uglier, more desperate than the last. 3 days after he was served, my phone started ringing at 7:23 p.m. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. He called again and again. 16 times in under an hour. I blocked the number. At 9:15 p.m., headlights swept across the front of the house. I watched from the upstairs window as he stood on the porch, confusion melting into panic when his key didn't work. I'd changed the locks that afternoon. Legally questionable, maybe, but the house was in my name. Purchased years before we married. My attorney had warned me it could be challenged. She'd also told me I had the right to feel unsafe. He banged on the door. "Open this door right now!" I cracked the bedroom window instead. Cold air rushed in. My voice didn't shake. "Go to a hotel," I said. "We'll communicate through attorneys." "You can't lock me out of my own house." "It's not your house," I replied evenly. "Check the deed." He screamed, swore, threatened. I closed the window, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, while his voice echoed into nothing. 20 minutes later, he left. The next morning, his brother called, angry, protective, loud. "She's devastated," he said. "She's crying at our mom's place. What the hell did you do?" "What I should have done 4 months ago," I answered. "Your sister's been cheating on me. I have proof." Silence. "She said you overreacted," he tried, "that it was just a friend." "A friend she met at his apartment at night while lying about book club," I said. "A friend she mocked me over to her girlfriends. Save it." He didn't argue after that. He couldn't. Then came the request from his attorney. He wanted to talk, to explain, to work things out. Claimed I was overreacting, that it didn't mean anything. I told my lawyer my terms. No mediation, no counseling, no negotiations beyond what the state required. I wasn't divorcing to punish him. I was divorcing to be done. "You'll lose some assets," my attorney warned. "House appreciation, retirement, possibly spousal support." "I know," I said. "It's worth it." The escalation turned uglier after that. Text messages from burner numbers, emotional pleas, then guilt, then anger, then manipulation. "Think about the kids. You're throwing away decades over one mistake," I replied once. "You threw it away when you cheated. We communicate through lawyers only." Blocked. Then the kids called. Our daughter first. Confused. Upset. Told me her mother said I'd locked him out without warning, that I was imagining things. "I have proof," I told her gently. "I can show you if you want, but you don't have to choose sides." Long silence, then disbelief, then quiet devastation. Our son's call was shorter, direct. "Do you have proof?" "Yes." "Then I support you," he said. "This sucks. I'm sorry." That evening, he showed up again, this time with his mother. They stood on my porch like an intervention. I opened the door, but left the chain on. "You don't throw away the marriage over a mistake," his mother said immediately. "This wasn't a mistake," I replied. "It was a pattern." He tried to push forward. "Please, just let me explain. I was confused." "You were organized," I said. "You scheduled lies. You bragged about it. You knew exactly what you were doing." When his mother pushed against the door, I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police," I said calmly. "You're trespassing." They left in 3 seconds. The escalation didn't stop there. A Facebook post appeared the next morning. Carefully worded. Vague. After 23 years of marriage, sometimes people grow apart. Comments flooded in, support for him, sympathy, quiet judgment aimed my way. I said nothing. Behind the scenes, his lawyer demanded half of everything, claimed he'd supported my career by managing the home, filed for temporary spousal support, tried to paint me as controlling, unstable, cruel. I filed evidence, photos, timelines, depositions. The story he tried to sell began cracking under weight, but the pressure didn't ease. It intensified. Because when someone loses control of the narrative, they don't go quietly. They go nuclear. The darkest moments aren't loud. They don't arrive with shouting or confrontation. They come quietly, late at night, when the adrenaline wears off and you're left alone with the weight of everything you've lost. For me, it happened in week 4. The legal attacks had become routine by then. Motions, counter-motions, emails full of accusations written in cold, polished language that stripped 23 years of marriage down to bullet points and percentages. I handled those during the day. I answered my attorney calmly. I showed up prepared. But nights were different. That's when the house felt too big, too empty. Rooms still held his things, his chair, his mug, the indentation on the mattress where he used to sleep. I hadn't moved anything yet. I told myself it was temporary. The truth was, I wasn't ready to erase the physical proof that my life hadn't always looked like this. One evening, after another call with my lawyer, I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun went down, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. My phone buzzed. A new notification. A message from my daughter. "Dad, people are messaging me asking if you hurt Mom." My chest tightened so suddenly it felt like I couldn't breathe. That was the moment it stopped being just about us. He had filed for a restraining order earlier that week, claiming I'd threatened him, that he feared for his safety. The hearing itself had been humiliating in its simplicity. The judge listened, flipped through the paperwork, and shut it down in minutes. Changing locks, ending communication, filing for divorce. None of it qualified as abuse. But the damage had already been done. He'd posted again online. Vague statements about protecting himself, about seeing someone's true colors. His friends rallied around him. Some of them knew the truth. Many didn't, and I had chosen silence. Now my children were paying the price for that silence. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying memories I hadn't touched in years. The day we moved into the house. The nights I stayed up late balancing spreadsheets while he slept beside me. The way I used to reach for him automatically in the dark. I wondered when exactly I had become disposable to him. When admiration turned into boredom. When loyalty became something he joked about to impress someone younger. For the first time since that Tuesday, I cried. Not for the affair. For the woman I'd been, the one who trusted so deeply she ignored her own instincts. The one who worked, provided, planned, and believed that effort was enough to keep a marriage intact. I questioned myself that night in ways I hadn't before. Had I missed something obvious? Had I failed in ways I couldn't see? Was there something about me that made him feel entitled to betray me so casually? Those thoughts were heavy, dangerous. They pressed in until my chest ached and my hands trembled in the dark. And then another message came in. This one from him, a new number. "You're destroying me. Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "I wanted a marriage where my partner didn't lie, cheat, and mock me. You destroyed that yourself. I'm just making it legal." I blocked the number and set the phone face down. The silence that followed was thick, but different. Not empty, final. That night, something broke inside me, but something else settled into place. The guilt I'd been carrying, the responsibility I'd taken on for his choices, cracked under the weight of truth. I didn't ruin his life. I refused to sacrifice mine to protect his lies. And once I accepted that, the darkness lost its grip. The turning point didn't come with closure or apologies. It came in a conference room under fluorescent lights, with a court reporter typing every word as if truth itself needed to be preserved before it could be believed. The deposition was scheduled for week 5. By then, I was exhausted in a way sleep didn't fix. My days were filled with emails from attorneys, and my nights with thoughts I couldn't shut off. But when my lawyer told me my husband would be sitting for questioning, under oath, something steady replaced the fatigue. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about facts. He arrived looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. His confidence had thinned. His posture wasn't relaxed. He didn't meet my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I saw fear instead of entitlement. His attorney had prepared him well. He cried when appropriate, apologized when it sounded convincing, spoke about feeling emotionally abandoned, claimed confusion, claimed loneliness, claimed he'd made a mistake. Then my attorney stood. Her questions were precise, surgical. How many times did you meet your lover at his apartment? I don't remember exactly. More than 10? Yes. More than 20? Possibly. The room went still. Did you tell your wife you were attending book club when you were actually meeting him? Yes. Did you tell your friends? And I quote, she doesn't suspect a thing. Too busy with her precious investments? His lawyer objected. My attorney slid a transcript across the table. We have a witness willing to testify. Color drained from his face. Did you mock your wife's sexual performance to your friends while discussing your affair? I was venting. Answer the question. Yes. And did you tell your lover you'd been happier these past 4 months than you'd been in a decade of marriage? Silence. The kind that exposes everything. Yes, he whispered. No more questions. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. In the parking lot afterward, he tried to approach me. His lawyer grabbed his arm, but not before he shouted, "You're destroying me. Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me?" I looked at him then. Really looked. I want a divorce, I said calmly. You destroyed our marriage. I'm just making it legal. I got into my car and drove away. Something shifted after that. The narrative he'd been selling began to collapse. Friends distanced themselves. His online sympathy dried up. The truth, dry, documented, undeniable, had a way of cutting through performance. When his attorney sent a settlement proposal asking for more than half of everything and long-term support, my lawyer laughed out loud. We countered with reality. State minimums, shorter duration, reduced percentages, no claim on my business beyond a fraction, no leverage, no mercy. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to power, not over him, but over my own life. The fear that had followed me for weeks loosened its grip. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was directing. The woman who had frozen on a staircase listening to betrayal had become someone who could sit across from it and not flinch. That was the turning point. Not revenge. Resolution. The fallout wasn't dramatic in the way movies promise. There were no last confessions, no grand apologies that changed anything. What followed was slower, heavier, a grinding series of consequences that settled into place one by one. 6 weeks after filing, we settled, 3 days before trial. Neither of us wanted to sit in a courtroom and have strangers dissect 23 years of marriage down to dollar values and sound bites. Or maybe, more accurately, he didn't want the deposition details read aloud under oath again. The truth had already done its damage. The final settlement was signed in a quiet conference room. I bought him out of 40% of the house's current value and kept it. He received 42% of the retirement accounts accumulated during the marriage, 15% of my business valuation, paid out over 5 years. Temporary spousal support that would end if he remarried or cohabitated, a number that was significant, but not the lifestyle he'd demanded. Altogether, he walked away with over $1 million in assets and future payments. Not nothing, just not the reward he believed he deserved. The judge wasn't sympathetic. He made that clear. The infidelity evidence mattered, not legally in every way, but practically. Tone matters. Credibility matters. And my husband had lost both. Outside the courthouse, he tried one last time. Can we talk? He asked, voice small. Just for a minute. No, I said. The papers are signed. We're done. He cried then. Not quietly, not gracefully. His lawyer pulled him away while he begged me to listen. I didn't look back. That night, my daughter met me for dinner. How are you really doing? She asked, watching me closely. Relieved? I said after a moment. It's over. She nodded, then sighed. He keeps calling me, saying he made a mistake, asking if there's any chance. There isn't, I said gently. He made dozens of choices over months. I'm not obligated to forgive any of them. My son called a few days later, told me his father was moving in with his mother permanently. That money was tight until the payout schedule caught up. That's not your problem, I said, and for the first time, I meant it without guilt. 2 weeks after the divorce finalized, the 32-year-old broke up with him. Apparently, being unemployed, living with his mother, and carrying the baggage of a public divorce wasn't nearly as appealing once the secrecy and excitement disappeared. The fantasies didn't survive daylight. Friends distanced themselves, some after court records leaked, some quietly, without explanation. Turns out publicly admitting to mocking your spouse while cheating doesn't earn long-term loyalty. His brother called once more. Do you feel satisfied? He asked bitterly. Ruining his life? I asked him if he'd feel satisfied if his wife cheated for months, lied repeatedly, mocked him to her friends, and then expected forgiveness. He hung up. 3 months later, I sold the house. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I bought a condo downtown, smaller, modern, quiet, mine. My business didn't suffer the way his attorney predicted. If anything, it grew. Clients respected how I'd handled myself. Some even sought me out because of it. I didn't start dating. I wasn't interested. Healing wasn't something I wanted to rush. So I was sleeping again, eating again, working with focus. The rage had burned itself out, leaving something clearer behind. Clarity. I hadn't destroyed his life. I had refused to absorb the consequences of his choices. And that refusal changed everything.